everybody, and welcome to Deadly Doctrine, where we discuss all things deadly and criminal. Today we will be discussing the Jonestown Massacre and the tragic fate of all of its members. This event ends with the murder of a congressman, several journalists, and the mass suicide of over 900 members. It caused a major shift in the world around us, and even today, there are so many references they make. Jim Jones was the reason the phrase "drink the Kool-Aid" is so popularized and used in many more ways. But before we start, let's get a word from our sponsor. This episode of Deadly Doctrine is sponsored by Kool-Aid. Kool-Aid is a refreshing drink filled with sugar and Red 40. They asked us today to clear their name of the Jonestown Massacre. They were not the ones that killed those people. It was the Flavor Aid. Summer, would you like to tell us how Kool-Aid tastes?
Kool-Aid is a phenomenal drink for kids of any age. It tastes good, looks good, and it's plastic, which is good for the earth.
Good. If you go to any local grocery store and use the code Deadly Doctrine, nothing will happen, but you can at least sure try. Disclaimer, we are not actually sponsored. Let's get a move on, shall we? First, let's discuss Jim Jones. Jim Jones was the man who eventually would be the one who led to the Jonestown Massacre. Jim was born on May 13th, 1931 in Crete, Indiana, to his parents, James Jones and Lynetta Jones. His parents were both not the best, to be frank. His father was a World War I veteran who suffered many different illnesses due to his injuries that he sustained during the war. This illness would lead to financial difficulties, which would strain the marriage between him and Lynette. During the Great Depression, the Jones family would eventually be evicted from their home, and their relatives would have them stay in a shack to live in a nearby town of Lynn. This place lacked plumbing and electricity, and they tried to earn income through farming and many other ways, but this would not end up working when more of his family's health deteriorated. They would lack food and financial support from themselves, relying on their own extended family, and sometimes they would even resort to foraging in nearby forests. According to multiple Jones biographers, his mother had no maternal instincts and frequently neglected her son. When he attended school, his family would threaten to cut off all financial assistance until his family got jobs, and his father was consistently hospitalized. Because of all these things, Jones was frequently absent. His family was frequently absent from his life. He would be described as a loner and very strange, and many other things. He eventually started to gain a very big interest in religion and political influences and many other things. He had the skills to be a preacher, according to many. A girl who dated him in high school remembered a pep rally before a basketball game. Quote, "Jimmy decided to stage an elaborate funeral for the other school. He got up and started preaching and did an incredible job. He had the control and inflection. It was like the real thing, but it was all intended to be a joke. He was very self-assured on stage. He had that coal black hair and piercing eyes that would look right through you." Unquote. He would graduate college with an interest and aptitude for medicine. He would work as a hospital orderly, and he would meet many different people. He met many people during his time as starting to become a preacher. Many people would have sympathy for Jones because of his circumstances, and his neighbors would report that he was an unusual child who was obsessed with religion and death. He had a hard time making friends and was, as I said, a loner. He would use profanity and greet his friends in profound ways, and he would have a hard time living his life. He would have a very big interest in different kinds of doctrines He would read stuff by Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, Karl Marx, and Gandhi, and this would influence him as a person. He would spend hours in community libraries and he would read, he would study political systems, and as World War II started, he became insanely interested in the Nazi Party. He would act as a dictator over other kids and yelling different insane things. Commenting on his childhood, Jones would state, "I was ready to kill by the end of 3rd grade. I mean, I was so aggressive and hostile. I was ready to kill. Nobody gave me love, any understanding, and in those days, a parent was supposed to go to with a child to school functions. There was some kind of a school performance, and everyone's parents were there. But mine. I'm standing alone. Always was alone." Unquote. He would be told to control his behavior, but his parents would refuse. He would go out and start doing many different things. In the early 1950s, he would announce to his wife that he would become a Methodist minister. He would start preaching at churches and being student pastors to kids around him. And when he eventually opened his own church, he would put some of his social interests to use. He would desegregate his church and be very willing to talk to anybody. He was actually inspired by a man named George Baker, who is also known as Father Divine. He would see this man and be inspired by his work. And a big influence that we would see in Jones was that Divine held unusual spiritual beliefs, claiming that he was God and demonstrating supernatural powers. Which we can see Jones does the exact same thing. He would say that he could see the future and help to heal those who were sick, even going as far as to stage these elaborate schemes in front of his masses. In the 1960s, he would open his own church. The church would be under the name the People's Temple. He was seen to be a very good man. He would do community service and he would work with everybody around him, but the truth could be far from what we ever thought. When people started asking about his church, we would learn that he was very cruel to his followers. He would humiliate them in front of other church members. They would be blackmailed and beaten, and he would even talk them over into signing over their homes and their houses and many other things. Jones would tell these members so many things to be able to get them into his life. He would tell them that their family would die. Their family has died, and that's why he can't talk to them. He would direct his followers to doing many different things, work, unpaid labor, and so much more. And some of the first known cases of serious abuse was when Jones would be mad about people not fulfilling visions or following the rules. The control over their members extended to many different things, even their sex lives and everything else. Some members were coerced to get abortions, and he would require sexual favors from women of the church. He often had problems with publicity. He would begin to start receiving negative press. Many reporters would cover his divine healing services during visits, and the news report led to many investigations. He would perform healing miracles on several occasions, his healings were revealed to be nothing but a hoax, unquote. In one incident, Jones drugged temple member Irene Mason, and while she was unconscious, a cast was put on her arm. When she would eventually come to and regain consciousness, she was told she had fallen and broken her arm, and was taken to the hospital. In a healing service, Jones would remove her cast in front of the congregation and tell them she was healed. And, of course, Irene was mesmerized, like, this man had healed her arm. He would have people line up that were in his inner circle to have their cancer healed. After being healed, the person would cough, which they would say would be a tumor, but it would be revealed to be a chicken gizzard. He would pretend to have special revelations and reveal hidden details of people's lives. And his methods weren't the best. Jones would be scared that his methods would be found out eventually. And he would terminate the ministry in Indiana because it was too far for him. And eventually, after a long, long time, he would have his family and all of his followers move to Guyana. He said that he was scared of a nuclear war because this was during the time of the Cold War, and he was scared of what would happen. And so he would purchase supplies and a settlement in Guyana, and he would call it Jonestown. Jonestown would be where everybody stayed for a long time, honestly. The commune grew and grew and grew, and as people got, more people joined, family members got worried. People would be getting these odd, weird letters, or some were worried that they weren't getting any contact at all. Families got scared and nervous, but they couldn't contact them because Jones was very against publicity. And after a long time, there would finally be a man who went to go and investigate. In November of 1978, Congressman Leo Ryan got together with a few journalists and went down to Jonestown. His delegation included all of these people that he brought with him would include family members of temple people and a camera crew and reporters. They would arrive in Guyana in November 17th, and on they would arrive November 15th, and they would go to Jonestown November 17th. He would host a reception for the delegation, and Ryan left, and he would narrowly avoid being stabbed by other members, and they were able to have 15 temple members who expressed a desire to leave, and Jones made no attempt to prevent their departure at the time. But as they went to go move these people, Ryan and all these people they'd be going onto their plane, and some of Jonestown's armed guard would arrive and shoot at them. These gunmen would kill Ryan and 4 others near the aircraft, and at the same time, one of the supposed defectors, Larry Layton, would draw a weapon and begin firing on members inside the other plane. NBC cameraman Bob Brown was able to capture footage of the first few seconds of the shooting, and this only happened before he was killed himself by the gunman. Something we wouldn't learn until later was that Jones was very, very paranoid. He became fearful of the government and everything about it, and so he started to hold these test drills. He would call them White Nights. Jones would call over intercoms, "Alert, alert, alert," over loudspeakers to get the community together in the central pavilion. They would remain at the pavilion in the drill, in which Jones would tell them the community had been surrounded by agents who wanted to destroy them. He would lead them in prayers, chanting, singing, many different things. But these drills would keep them fearful of going outside of the commune. And one time, he would tell his followers he was going to distribute poison for everybody to drink in an act of suicide. A batch of fruit punch was served to everybody who sat by weeping, and they would drink it and wait for their death. After some time, Jones told everybody that it was only a drill and there was not any poison in their drink. But after two of these occasions, after a revolutionary suicide vote was reached, a simulated mass suicide was rehearsed. They would go on rehearsing these and many, many more. Later that same day, on November 18th, 1978, Jones would receive word that his security guards failed to kill all of Ryan's party. Jones concluded the escapees would inform everybody about their escape and decided to enact the White Night. They decided that they should have committed the revolutionary suicide. The temple had received monthly half-pound shipments of cyanide since 1976. And in 1978, during May, a temple doctor wrote a memo on Jones asking to test cyanide on Jonestown's pigs. A mixture of Flavor Aid, which is off-brand Kool-Aid, and cyanide was handed to members of the community to drink. They would take syringes and inject it into those who refused. They were surrounded by armed guards from everybody that they knew, and they would offer the basic dilemma of death by poison or death by being killed by a guard. Rouletta Paul and her 1-year-old were the first to consume the poison. The child's mouth, like many others, was filled using a syringe without a needle, and then Paul injected the poison into her own mouth. After this, they would take these people down a wooden walkway that led outside of the pavilion, and as parents watched their children die, they would describe scenes of panic and confusion. They would walk around like they were in a trance, and many quietly waited for their turn to die. It wasn't clear if some initially thought the exercise was another White Night rehearsal. When members wept and showed signs of being disturbed and worried, Jones would tell them to stop these hysterics. This is not the way for people who are socialists or communists to die, the way for us to die. We must die with dignity. He would tell them to don't be afraid to die, and that death is just stepping over into another plane, and that adding, death is a friend. He would direct that the children would be killed first, and that the other adults would poison themselves after the children have died. He had recorded everything on a tape for everybody there. He would conclude the tape with, "We didn't commit suicide. We committed an act of revolutionary suicide, protesting the conditions of an inhumane world." A day later, when authorities would arrive, they would find over 900 cultists dead that day, over 200 of which were children, and Jim Jones himself was found with a bullet wound to his head. They would see everybody here, and it was horrific. Only 85 members of the community had survived. Some ran into the jungle, and people would hide in ditches or in their own dormitories. They would find that Jim Jones would have had hundreds of passports stacked, and that he took money from all of his members, having about $500,000 US in cash, and much more was already deposited into other bank accounts. The military of Guyana would arrive to find all of them dead. They would come and see the hundreds of bodies scattering the floor, seeing that they would be stuck on top of each other. They seemingly had just dropped. They saw all of this, and when this was reported, it shook our country to its core. People were outraged by the deaths of the children and all of these people, because this event, before 9/11, was one of the largest mass deaths related to U.S. history. Jim Jones was a sick man, and what he had done to these people makes you hurt. It brings tragedy, and thinking of all those families that lost husbands, wives, kids, fathers, mothers, or families who lost everything. It was horrific. Thank you guys so much for watching. I know this isn't the happiest topic, but I really do hope you learned something.